I've always believed truck drivers carry stories heavier than any cargo strapped to their trailers. You don't spend thousands of hours alone on abandoned highways, listening to wind whistle through old weather seals and fog wrap around your windshield like a living thing, without eventually meeting something you can't explain. People think we exaggerate. They call us tired, delirious, stressed. But ask any long-haul driver who has crossed the country in the quietest, darkest hours of the morning, between the dead silence of 3 a.m. and the first faint blue light of dawn, and they'll tell you the same thing. Sometimes you're not alone out there. Sometimes you hear voices. Sometimes they talk back. Before we continue, listen to it. Guys, quick warning. We're doing a $3,000 giveaway on the channel this month. To enter, just subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment about what you thought of the story. You'll be automatically in the draw. I used to think all trucker ghost stories were just that, stories, until the year I decided to gather the worst ones for this recording. I thought it would be simple. Interview a few old drivers, take notes, choose the best tales. But every person I spoke to carried the same look, the quiet, sunken stare of someone who knows nobody believes them, and someone who desperately wishes they could forget. 2 weeks into my research, something strange began happening to me too. My phone would ring at dawn with a caller ID labeled unknown, and when I picked up, all I heard was wind, fast, loud, like it was tearing across a highway at impossible speed. I'd hang up, and seconds later, it would ring again, always the same time, always the same sound. That was when I realized the stories weren't just stories. And once you start listening to these things, something on the road starts listening back. Before we dive into these accounts, let me know one thing. Where are you listening from right now, and what time is it where you are? And remember, if you're new here, get ready. Tonight's lineup is intense. Now let's get into the first testimony that changed everything about how I see the open road. The first man I spoke to was a driver named Coleman, a quiet older guy who had a voice like gravel and hands that shook slightly even when he held them still. His story happened on a back highway stretching through the desert. No towns, no gas stations, nothing but dust and horizon for almost 60 miles. He told me he was driving his rig sometime before sunrise, sipping the last of a bitter gas station coffee when he saw a shape on the shoulder of the road up ahead. He slowed a little, expecting maybe a stranded hitchhiker or some drunk who had wandered away from a broken-down car. But the closer he got, the more wrong it looked. It was a man, barefoot, tall, wearing torn clothes, and he was walking perfectly in step with the truck. Coleman thought maybe he was seeing things, so he blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, and looked again. The man was still there. Same pace, same calm stride. No running, no struggle. As if the truck were moving with him or he with it. Coleman said the man's head slowly turned, and even through the glass he could hear the whisper. His childhood nickname, one nobody used. One nobody should even know unless they'd been there when his grandfather gave it to him decades back. Coleman rolled his window up, even though it was already closed, pressed his back into the seat as if trying to melt into it. He forced himself not to look again, but he couldn't help it. When he glanced down, the man was staring up at him, smiling like they shared some secret. Coleman floored it. His truck roared forward, desert wind blasting the sides, but the man didn't fall behind, didn't sprint, didn't change pace, just drifted effortlessly, like he was being carried by a conveyor belt of shadows beneath the road. When Coleman reached the next town, he pulled into a truck stop bathroom and vomited. He swore he would never tell the story, but sometimes the truth claws its way out, whether we want it to or not. Weeks later, a road crew repaving that same stretch of highway dug up old human remains, buried so deep they must have been there for decades. Some believed it was the bones of a missing hitchhiker from the 70s. Others said it was something older. Coleman didn't care. What haunted him wasn't what was found underground. It was the fact that whatever he saw hadn't been under there anymore. It had been above ground, keeping pace with him, whispering his childhood name like an old friend. The next driver I interviewed was a man named Elliot, who told me his encounter happened on a foggy mountain pass known for accidents. It was early morning, the kind of hour where the world is still asleep, and the fog was so dense it looked like wet cement pouring over the asphalt. Elliot said he was half listening to static on his CB radio when a voice cut through, calm and familiar. "Easy, son," it said. "Slow down for the bend." It froze him. Nobody used that tone except his father, who had passed away years ago. He grabbed the CB mic, hands trembling, and asked who was speaking. The voice didn't answer directly. It just said his name again, the way his father used to say it when he was a kid, afraid of thunder. Elliot checked his GPS. Straight road ahead for the next 30 miles. No turns, no bend, just a smooth, flat stretch of highway, but the voice repeated the warning, firmer this time. "Son, slow down." Against all logic, Elliot tapped the brakes. The fog parted just enough for him to see it. A section of the road completely collapsed into a ravine, recent landslide. No barriers, no warnings. He slammed the brakes, trailer swinging, stopping just feet before the drop. He sat there shaking, heart pounding violently against his ribs. When he tried to thank the voice, the radio went dead, cutting straight to static. And no matter how many times he scanned the frequencies afterward, he never heard that voice again. He told me he never understood whether it had truly been his father or something pretending to be him. But one thing he knew for certain: if he hadn't listened, he would have gone over the edge. Another driver, a woman named Rhea, had a story that still gives me chills, no matter how many times I replay the audio of her interview. She told me about a place she called Mile Marker 47, except the strangest part was that Mile Marker 47 didn't exist anymore. It had been removed after a fatal crash involving a young woman years earlier. But every time Rhea's route took her through that area before sunrise, she heard a faint woman's voice through her open window, asking where she was going, pleading, crying softly. Rhea tried ignoring it, turning up her music, rolling her windows shut, but the voice always found a way in. It wasn't until one early morning when the voice finally came through clearly. "Please stop. Let me in before they get here." Rhea refused, kept driving, heart sprinting inside her chest. The voice grew desperate. "Please, I died alone out here. Please don't leave me." Rhea pressed the gas as hard as she could, and the crying faded into the wind. Later that week, she pulled out her maps and realized something horrifying. She hadn't passed Mile Marker 47 at all. She hadn't even been on the correct highway. According to her GPS logs, she had been driving on a route that no longer existed on any modern map, a road that had been officially shut down years before her truck was even manufactured. When she asked the regional highway department about it, they told her a landslide had wiped out the entire section and turned it into unstable ground. Nobody should have been able to drive through it, but somehow she had, and someone had begged her not to leave them behind. I thought I'd heard enough after that, but then came the story that stuck with me longer than all the others combined. A quiet, soft-spoken man named Gene explained that he'd spent years talking to a passenger he never picked up. He said he didn't notice it at first. When you drive long stretches alone, you get used to talking just to stay awake, to fill the silence. But one morning near the break of dawn, as he joked about some weird snack wrappers accumulating on his dashboard, he heard someone behind him chuckle. He froze, slowly turned his head. Nobody was there, but the air felt heavy, like someone unseen had just leaned forward to listen better. Over time, the presence grew familiar, even comforting. Gene found himself talking to it on long trips, telling it about his ex-wife, his bad knees, the aches in his hands from decades gripping the wheel. One day at a way station, an officer knocked on his door and asked if everything was all right. Gene laughed and said he had just been talking to his passenger. The officer frowned and asked, "Sir, who are you talking to?" Gene gestured to the seat beside him. The officer's face drained of color. "There's no one there." Gene insisted he wasn't alone. The officer led him inside to show him the security footage. Gene watched himself gesturing, talking, smiling right at the empty passenger seat. Nothing there except a faint distortion in the air, like heat waves rising off asphalt at noon. It leaned toward him. The last story came from a driver named Hal, who swore he'd been followed for years by what he called the ghost convoy. Every morning between 3 and 5 a.m., he'd check his side mirrors and see a line of trucks behind him. No headlights on, no engine rumble, no movement except a slight drifting motion. At first, he thought it was just his eyes playing tricks. But over time, he realized the trucks never passed him, never fell back. They kept the same distance, no matter how fast or slow he went. What terrified him most was the way they looked in his mirror, perfectly still, like they weren't driving but being pushed by the night itself. One morning, Hal aimed his phone at the back window and hit record. When he reviewed the footage later, he saw the reflection of his own truck interior perfectly, but behind it, the convoy wasn't moving forward at all. They were motionless, frozen in place, yet still somehow following him. It reminded him of coffins being carried quietly by pallbearers. When he showed the footage to others, they all shrugged it off as reflections, camera glitches, compression artifacts. But Hal told me that no glitch could explain what he experienced next, because on his last drive, the convoy didn't stay behind him. For the first time, one of those silent trucks started pulling up beside him, moving with impossible smoothness, until its cab aligned perfectly with his own window. Hal looked over. There was no driver, no interior light, just a dark, empty cabin facing him. And then, as if acknowledging him, the truck's passenger door slowly began to open. Hal slammed the gas and didn't look back. He quit driving 2 weeks later. I collected these stories thinking they were just tragedies, hallucinations, or tricks of exhaustion. But the longer I worked on this project, the more I noticed things around me shifting. My dawn phone calls grew louder, carrying voices that sounded almost curious. Shadows outside my window seemed to linger longer than they should. And last week, on a deserted highway at the same hour all these stories mentioned, I checked my rearview mirror and saw it, the faint outline of a truck with its headlights off, drifting behind me, matching my speed exactly. I don't know how long it followed me. I refused to check the footage on my dash cam. Some things are better left unseen. But if you're a trucker, or even just someone who drives before sunrise, listen carefully the next time you're alone on the road. If you hear a voice whisper your name, if you see a figure pacing your truck, if your CB radio flickers with static that sounds too familiar, don't assume it's your imagination. Something is out there, and it's listening. I realized that too late. Because once you admit to yourself that something is listening, you start to notice how often you give it exactly what it wants. Every phone call you answer, every whispered story you replay in your head while staring at the road, every time you hit record and talk into a microphone so strangers can hear you in the dark, you're opening a door for something that doesn't sleep, doesn't blink, and doesn't forget the sound of your voice. After that night with the truck behind me, I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the reflection, some weird combination of taillights and fatigue. I told myself that if I stopped thinking about those drivers and the things they'd seen, it would all fade from my mind like a bad dream. But it didn't. In fact, the more I tried not to think about them, the more they pushed themselves forward, like static rising louder, the more you fight to tune it out. I started hearing little things first. A faint cough from the back seat when I was driving alone, the sound of a zipper being pulled in the empty passenger seat, knuckles rapping twice on the inside of a door that nobody had opened. I'd check every time. Glove compartment, under the seats, the back, nothing, just the stale smell of old air and the faint crumbs of whatever I'd eaten on my last long trip. Then the calls started changing. Instead of wind, I began to hear something under the wind, a murmur, not clear enough to understand, but unmistakably human, the way a crowded room sounds when you're standing behind a closed door. I stopped answering unknown numbers altogether, but that didn't help. One morning I woke up to find 32 missed calls from the same blocked ID, all clustered in a small window of time, right before sunrise. When I checked the voicemails, they were all about 3 seconds long, and every single one was identical. The sound of my own engine, racing, and my own voice screaming a single word I couldn't quite make out. I don't drive a truck. I don't even own a vehicle with an engine that loud. I tried to rationalize it, glitch, spoofing, some kind of stupid prank. But at a certain point, coincidence starts to look a lot more like something pulling the strings. I decided I needed distance from the project. I put all my notes in a box, closed my laptop, and told myself I'd take a break from trucker ghost stories. Maybe switch to something softer. Urban legends, strange coincidences, anything that didn't involve empty highways and dead voices. That same afternoon, an email hit my inbox from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple. I heard you're collecting stories. There was no greeting, no name, just a short body. I drove that route. The one your first guy told you about. The barefoot man beside the truck. I saw him too, but he wasn't beside the rig when I saw him. He was waiting in front of mine. Please, call me before my next haul. There was a number attached, and unlike the blocked calls, this one was clear, local, traceable. I stared at it for a long time, pulse drumming in my ears. Common sense told me to walk away. Curiosity told me this was exactly why I started collecting these stories in the first place. In the end, you can probably guess which voice I listened to. I called. A man answered on the first ring, breathing heavily like he'd been running. He didn't introduce himself. "You're the one doing that thing with the truck drivers," he said. His voice was rough but not old, somewhere in that middle age where sleep never really feels complete and stress has a permanent seat at the table. I confirmed quietly that yes, I'd been interviewing drivers. I asked if he'd like to talk about what he'd seen, maybe with the recorder on. There was a long silence on the other end, the kind that feels like someone is staring straight through the phone line at you. "I don't want you recording this," he finally said. "Not yet. I just need to know if your guy, Coleman, that's what you called him, if he said anything about the barefoot man's face." I flipped through my mental file. I remembered the clothes, the pace, the whisper. I realized I didn't remember anything about the man's face. I told him that. "That's because he doesn't have one," the driver said. The room suddenly felt smaller, air heavier. I asked him what he meant. "I was coming up the same stretch," he continued. "Dark all around. No cars, no lights, nothing. I'm zoning out, fighting to stay awake. And I see this shape standing in the lane ahead of me. Not on the shoulder, right in the middle. I lay on the horn, but it doesn't move, doesn't flinch. I yank the wheel, trailer swaying, and I swear I feel it brush the side of the cab as I pass. When I look in the mirror, I see this guy jogging along the line where the pavement meets the dirt, like he decided at the last second to come along. Bare feet, pants shredded, shirt hanging off like he was dragged over concrete before he stood up. I'm telling myself it's just some lunatic out here. But then he gets closer, close enough that I should see his face. Only there isn't one. No eyes. No nose, no mouth, just skin, smooth, like someone forgot to finish drawing him. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until my chest hurt. The driver kept talking, voice shaking now. I thought I was losing my mind. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. Still there, same pace as me. But the worst part was when he tilted his head, like he was trying to look up at me. And I heard this whisper, clear as day, right in my ear. "You remember me." But I swear to you, I've never seen that thing in my life." I asked where he was now, if he was still on the road. "For now," he said. "Got one more trip. Heading through that stretch again tomorrow before the sun comes up. They changed my usual route last minute." His breathing picked up again, quick and shallow. I think something wants me back there. I just needed someone else to confirm I'm not crazy, someone who's heard the stories." I told him he wasn't crazy, that others had seen things, that I believed him. The words came out automatically, but as they left my mouth, I wasn't sure if I was reassuring him or trying to convince myself. Before we hung up, he asked me one more question. "If I don't make it back from this run," he said, "you'll tell them I tried to warn somebody, right? You'll at least put that in whatever you're making?" I promised I would. It was an easy promise at the time. I had no idea how soon I'd be forced to keep it. The next morning came and went. No message, no call. His number stayed silent. I told myself he was just busy in a dead spot, maybe sleeping it off at some rest stop. But by the following day, the news hit social media before anyone could spin a sanitized version. A semi had been found at an angle in the desert, cab door hanging open, engine still idling, trailer intact, no sign of a collision, no skid marks. The driver was gone. They eventually listed him as missing. Maybe he wandered off in a daze, they said. Maybe he had some episode and walked into the desert. They searched. They found nothing. No footprints, no body. Just a single thing stuck in one of the deep grooves of the tire. A strip of fabric, off-white and frayed like it had been torn from a shirt long, long ago. I knew better than to connect the dots out loud. I kept my mouth shut. But that night, lying awake, phone on the pillow beside my head, I heard a vibration. A single message came through. No contact name, no profile picture. Just a number, the same one I had called before. There was only one line of text. You remember me. I threw the phone across the room so hard it hit the wall and dropped flat on the floor. The screen stayed lit. I could see the typing bubble appear, vanish, appear again, like whoever was on the other end couldn't quite decide what to say next. Finally, another message arrived. Look behind you. I didn't. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The room stayed quiet, but in that heavy, pressing way that makes your ears ring. I sat like that for what felt like hours, until the phone dimmed and eventually went dark. When I finally worked up the courage to stand and turn around, the only thing behind me was my own shadow on the wall, stretched long and thin by the streetlight seeping in through the blinds. No one else. Nothing else. But the feeling of being watched clung to me like a second skin. After that, the other stories started to change shape in my head. They weren't just isolated, weird events scattered across highways anymore. They felt connected, like pieces of a bigger pattern I was now tangled in without meaning to be. I went back and listened again to the recording of Elliot, the man whose dead father warned him over the CB about the broken road ahead. This time I focused on the background. Beneath the hum of the engine and the crackle of radio static, there was a faint sound I hadn't noticed the first time. Someone else breathing. Not Elliot. Not his father. A third breath, slow and patient, like it was sitting right between them. Ria's recording had something too. When she described mile marker 47 and the voice begging to be let in, I'd always thought the unsettling part was her shaky tone, the way the words stuck in her throat. But now that I listened more carefully, I heard something behind her, outside the truck, a distant scraping like fingers dragging slowly along metal, keeping time with her words. Gene, the man who talked to a passenger he never picked up, had given me his old dashcam SD card. I hadn't bothered to check it initially, figuring it would just show long stretches of highway and his silent face. Now, desperate to see if there was anything else, I plugged it in. Most of it was what I expected. Empty roads, passing headlights, the occasional gas station. Then I found the clip from the way station, the same one he told me about, where the officer insisted he'd been talking to nobody. I watched it with my heart rising into my throat. In the footage, Gene sits in the driver's seat, laughing, gesturing, nodding as if listening to someone tell a long, complicated story. His lips move. He looks to the passenger side again and again. At first glance, the seat is empty, but if you stare long enough, let your eyes relax, you start to see it. A faint bend in the fabric, the impression of weight where nothing should be. The air ripples once, like heat from an invisible body. Then Gene leans in, eyes fixed on whatever is there, and for a split second the camera glitches, and you can see the outline of a head where there should be nothing, turned sharply toward the lens, as if it knows it's being watched. The frame freezes when the file corrupts. The last thing visible is that half-formed head shape, featureless, but somehow focused directly on whoever watches the recording. That was enough for me. I slammed the laptop shut. The next days blurred together. I barely slept. Every little sound in the house felt wrong somehow. A creak in the floorboards made me picture invisible feet pacing the hallway. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like distant engine noise. Even the wind outside started to remind me of trucks cutting through the air at high speed. I told myself I just needed to get away from it all, clear my head, put some distance between me and the stories. That's when one of the drivers I'd spoken to months ago, a woman named Marla, messaged me. She said she was passing through not far from my town and asked if I wanted to ride along for a short leg of her haul. "Might help you understand the feeling better," she wrote. "It's one thing to hear about it in an interview. It's another thing to be in the cab when the road gets strange." If you're wondering why I said yes, I don't have a good answer. Curiosity, arrogance, the belief that documenting something puts you above it, like you're a scientist in a lab instead of a piece of meat in the experiment. We agreed that I'd meet her at a small truck stop off the highway. I told myself I'd just ride for a little while, get some fresh material, and then go home, and finally properly close this chapter. I arrived while the sky was still dark. The lot was mostly quiet, a few rigs parked under buzzing lamps, the air heavy with the smell of fuel and distant coffee. Marla's truck was hard to miss. She'd told me to look for the one with a little plastic hula girl on the dash. Sure enough, when I climbed up into the cab, there she was, glued right next to a worn crucifix and a faded photo of two kids playing in a yard. Marla herself was lean, sharp-eyed, hair pulled back under a cap. She greeted me with a tired smile and a nod. "You ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," I answered, trying to sound casual. As we pulled out of the lot and onto the highway, I felt a strange mix of familiarity and dread. I'd heard so many drivers describe this perspective, the world framed by the wide windshield, the endless ribbon of road, the comforting rattle of a cab that's seen too many miles, that it felt almost like stepping into a story I'd already heard 100 times. For the first stretch, nothing strange happened. We talked about normal things, bad rest-stop food, other drivers, the way people cut off rigs like they're invincible. Gradually, the world outside the glass grew emptier. Streetlights thinned out until there were none. The horizon became a simple line dividing black earth and slightly less black sky. The digital clock on the dash rolled quietly forward, edging into that hour where the night feels heavy and the day is still a rumor. It was then that Marla reached over and turned the radio off. The sudden silence made me realize how much I'd been relying on the background noise to distract me. "You feel it yet?" she asked. "Feel what?" "The pressure. Like something sitting on your chest, but not inside. Outside, watching the truck instead of you." I wanted to say no, that I felt nothing, that this was all power of suggestion, but I did feel something. An awareness, almost. Like the darkness outside wasn't just empty air, but a crowd pressed up against the glass, faces inches away that you couldn't see. "It gets worse along this stretch," she added, eyes narrowing at the road ahead. "This is where I started hearing them." I swallowed. "Hearing who?" "The ones nobody believes are there." She reached down and flicked the CB volume knob with her thumb. The speaker crackled to life with static. For a while that was all we heard. Just the hiss and occasional click as the signal shifted. Then, under the noise, a thin, trembling voice came through. "Anyone there?" It was so faint I thought I imagined it. Marla didn't react at first. Her grip on the wheel tightened just a little. I watched the road, then the CB, then her face. The voice came again, slightly clearer this time, like it had edged closer to the front of the sound. "Can anyone hear me?" It wasn't a normal call. No handle, no location, no station. Just the sound of someone desperate not to be alone. Marla's jaw clenched. "Ignore it," she muttered. "It's never really asking us." "What do you mean?" I whispered. She didn't answer. The voice repeated the question, now with a hint of panic. "Please, is anyone there?" Without thinking, I leaned toward the microphone. My hand hovered over it. I wanted to respond. That's what I do. It's my instinct. When someone calls out, I answer. But before I could press the button, Marla slapped my hand away so hard it stung. I said, "Ignore it." Her eyes flicked to the side mirror, then back to the road. "If you answer, it hears you. Once it knows your voice, it doesn't forget. The hair on my arms stood on end. "What is it?" I asked. "Who?" She shook her head, staring straight ahead. "Sometimes it sounds like a kid, sometimes like an old man, sometimes like my sister. I don't think it knows what it's supposed to be, just something stuck between here and wherever the hell the rest of them go. It uses whatever it thinks will make you talk back." The voice crackled again, louder now, edges sharpening. "Please, I don't know where I am." The sound of wind rushed behind the words, the way it does when someone calls from a moving vehicle with the windows down. Except there were no other vehicles around, just us, the road, and the darkness. I stared at the CB speaker like it might suddenly start bleeding. "You heard other drivers talk about this?" I asked. "A few," she said. "Most won't admit it. Nobody wants to be the one who says they've been conversing with ghosts over radio, but we all know. The ones that really listen to the static know something else is broadcasting out here." The voice became more frantic. "Please answer me. I can't see anything. It's just black." The way it said black made my throat tighten, like it wasn't describing the absence of light but something thick, choking, smothering. I thought of the missing driver, of the email, of the single line of text. "You remember me." My skin crawled with the realization that whoever or whatever was calling out might not be looking for help. It might be looking for recognition, for someone to say, "Yes, I've heard of you. Yes, I remember." That's how it spreads, I thought, through memory, through stories, through the act of answering. The CB hissed, then went quiet for a moment. I could hear Marla's breathing, steady but heavy, and my own, thin and shaky. Then a new sound came through, slow, familiar, a whisper. It said my name, not just my first name, but the way my mother used to say it when she wanted my full attention, the way no one else says it anymore. I froze. My eyes met Marla's. She saw the color drain from my face. "Turn it off," I croaked. She didn't argue. Her hand snapped to the knob, cutting the CB to silence. The truck's interior felt too small now, as if the darkness outside had pressed in against the walls of the cab, shrinking it by inches. "It shouldn't know your name," she murmured. "You're not one of us." "I've been talking to you all," I said, voice barely audible, "listening, recording." She let that sink in. Her shoulders dropped slightly, a look of exhausted understanding passing over her face. "Then maybe that's enough," she said quietly. "Maybe just listening is all it needs." We drove on like that for a while. No radio, no CB, just the sound of the engine and the hum of tires. I tried to convince myself that was it, that we'd turned it off, cut the line, severed the connection. But you can't just hang up on something that doesn't use phones. After a few miles, Marla's eyes flicked to the mirror again. "Don't look yet," she said. "Just tell me if you feel like there's someone behind us." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" "Not a car," she whispered. "Not a truck. Just someone." I swallowed hard and tried to focus on the dashboard. The hula girl bobbed gently with each bump. The crucifix swung on its chain. The photo of the kids stared back at me, frozen in some sunny day long before all this. At the edge of my vision, something moved where there should have been nothing. A slow, dragging shadow keeping pace. "I feel it," I finally admitted. My voice sounded small, like it was coming from a long way off. "Now look," she said. Against every instinct screaming at me not to, I turned my head and glanced into the side mirror. For a moment, all I saw was the reflection of our trailer, the faint glimmer of our own lights, the empty stretch of road behind us. Then, as my eyes adjusted, I saw it. A shape, human-sized but wrong somehow, walking in the same direction we were driving, matching our speed perfectly. Bare feet hitting the pavement in a slow, deliberate rhythm, arms hanging too loosely at its sides, clothes tattered, head tilted slightly upward, as if looking right at me through the glass. I couldn't see its face. There was just a smooth blur where eyes and nose and mouth should have been. Even so, I knew it recognized me. My chest tightened until I thought my ribs might crack. "Don't break," I whispered. "I'm not." Marla replied. I never do when it shows up. I just keep going and hope it loses interest. It? I echoed, because somehow calling it he felt too human. Whatever's left of whoever we couldn't save, she said. Or maybe whatever was here long before we ever built these roads. I don't know. I just know it likes people who pay attention to it. As if hearing that, the faceless shape in the mirror cocked its head a little further, almost curious, then began to move closer, not by running or speeding up, but by simply gliding, erasing the distance between us without any change in pace. Soon it was no longer behind us, but beside us, reflected in the glass like a passenger in a car that wasn't there. I watched, unable to tear my eyes away, as it lifted one hand and placed it flat against the air where our cab should have been, as if testing a window. The mirror surface vibrated with a tiny hum, like static gathering before a shock. "Look away," Marla hissed. "If you keep staring, it'll think you're inviting it in." I forced myself to rip my gaze from the mirror, stared straight ahead instead. The road stretched out in an endless grey ribbon, swallowing our headlights. Minutes ticked by, heavy and slow. I didn't look again. I didn't need to. I could feel when it finally drifted away, the pressure in the air easing slightly, like the moment after someone steps out of a room you didn't realize they'd entered. Only then did Marla speak. "You see now?" she asked. My voice shook. "What was that?" "Another one of your stories," she said. "Except this time, you're not just the one collecting it. You're in it." When she dropped me back at the truck stop, dawn was just starting to smear a faint blue-gray across the horizon. The place looked normal in that washed-out early light. Rows of parked rigs, a sleepy cashier behind smeared glass, birds picking at crumbs near the pumps. But normal doesn't mean safe, not after what I'd seen. As I stepped down from the cab, Marla grabbed my wrist. Her grip was firm, almost bruising. "Listen," she said, eyes locked on mine. "You keep doing what you're doing if you want to. Tell their stories, give them voices. But understand something. The more people listen, the more whatever's out there knows we're listening too. It likes attention. It feeds on it. And it doesn't care whether the ones paying attention are behind a wheel or lying in bed with headphones on." I nodded, throat too dry to answer. She let go and pulled the door shut. The truck rumbled to life, and as she pulled away, I saw the hula girl bobbing in the window, shaking her tiny plastic hips like this was just another morning, just another run. Nothing weird about it. I stood there for a long time after she left, watching the highway. A few cars passed, another rig merged, engine roaring, nothing unusual, nothing that screamed I saw something impossible, and it saw me back. Eventually, I went home. I sat in front of my microphone. I opened my notes. I'd thought about deleting everything, burning the pages, pretending none of this ever happened. Instead, I pressed record. Because here's the thing I finally realized. The road doesn't care whether we're afraid of it. It doesn't care whether we believe in what walks along its shoulders or glides in our mirrors. It just keeps stretching on, swallowing miles and men and memories alike. The only choice any of us have is whether we acknowledge what's really out there with us, or pretend the voices we hear are just in our heads. So if you're hearing this, if you made it to this point, you're part of it now. You've listened. You've pictured the barefoot man, the ghost convoy, the faceless shape in the mirror. You've imagined the CB crackling in the dark, a voice that sounds a little too much like someone you lost calling your name. And maybe, just maybe, something out there has noticed you listening. Tonight, when you turn this off and the room goes quiet, pay attention. If you hear static when there shouldn't be any, if you hear wind in a room with the windows closed, if your phone lights up with an unknown number just before the light outside your window starts to change, remember the drivers who tried to warn you. Remember the ones nobody believed. And whatever you do, if a voice you recognize whispers, "You remember me?" don't answer. Because once you do, once you speak back, you're not just a listener anymore. You're another story on the road. And out there, in those empty stretches of highway where the world forgets you exist, the road always finds a way to listen back. I didn't plan to tell you any of that. The script I had written originally ended earlier, back when this was just a neat, self-contained anthology about haunted highways and lonely drivers losing their minds in the dark. I had a clean closing line, a safe distance between their stories and my life. I liked that distance. It made me feel like I was handling something dangerous with thick gloves on. But the night I sat down to record, things didn't go the way they were supposed to. I read the script straight through. Lights off, only the glow from my monitor and the soft red LED on the mic. The house was quiet. You know that kind of quiet where you can hear the fabric of your shirt shift if you breathe too hard? That kind. I finished the last line, hit stop, saved the file, and sat back in my chair with that strange mix of relief and exhaustion that comes after saying too many words in one sitting. Then my recording software glitched. The waveform on the screen stretched longer than it should have. I frowned, scrolled. I knew exactly how many minutes I had been recording, and this was longer by several minutes. My first thought was that the program had kept rolling after I hit stop, maybe picked up some muttering or a chair squeak. I dragged the timeline to the end and hit play. For a few seconds I heard nothing, just that faint hum of room noise. Then something else faded in under it, so softly I almost missed it. It was the sound of an engine. Not a car engine, not a fan. I drive sometimes, I know the difference. This was a big diesel engine idling, low rumble, uneven, like an old rig catching its breath. It got louder, like it was pulling up right next to whatever was recording it. I stared at the screen, my own voice nowhere in this section. Nothing labeled, nothing marked. I hadn't been talking, I hadn't been moving, but something was there anyway. Then, under the engine, I heard myself, not narrating, not reading, just breathing. The kind of heavy, slightly panicked breath you hear when someone's trying to stay quiet. I knew it was my breathing because I recognized the rhythm, the little hitch I get when I'm trying not to make sound. Only I have no memory of standing anywhere near a truck while that was recorded. The breath got closer, like I had leaned toward the mic, even though my hands were nowhere near the controls when that section supposedly captured. And over that, another voice, clear and sharp, cut through like a knife through cloth. You remember me. I ripped my headphones off so fast the cord snapped tight and almost yanked the interface off the desk. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to break out. The room that had felt comfortably dark a minute ago suddenly felt full. Not with people, not with anything I could see, but with attention. The air had weight to it, like a crowded elevator where nobody's speaking. I told myself there was a logical explanation. Audio corruption, old files getting mixed. Maybe I accidentally re-imported something. I spent an hour combing through my drive, opening everything I'd ever recorded, but nothing had that engine rumble, that breath, that line, that voice. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faceless figure in Marla's mirror, keeping pace with us, hand pressed against an invisible window. And every time I checked my phone, the same blocked number blinked on and off, as if someone was hovering over the call button and changing their mind at the last second. The next day, I convinced myself I was being dramatic. I edited the main audio, cut off the extra section with the truck and the voice, saved it separately in a trash folder I didn't plan to open again, and finished mastering the track. It sounded fine. Just a horror story about truck drivers and spirits and haunted roads. Exactly what I'd promised. It felt wrong to upload it, but it felt worse not to. Like I'd be holding something inside that didn't want to stay there. I scheduled it. When it finally went live, I did what I always do. I watched the comments. At first they were what you'd expect. People talking about listening at night, about being truckers themselves, about having seen weird things on long routes. A few joked about not sleeping. A few said they were listening from their cabs right then, parked in dark lots somewhere miles from anyone they know. I scrolled, tried to answer a few, tried to pretend everything was normal. Then I saw the first one. It was a simple comment. No profile picture, no videos on the account, just a grey silhouette and a name that looked like a random string of letters and numbers. The comment said, "I heard him walking beside my truck once. He doesn't knock. He just waits for you to notice. That alone wouldn't have bothered me. People say stuff like that all the time under horror videos. Usually it's a joke. Then I saw the timestamp. In progress, 13:07. My heart dropped. The story I had just posted was over an hour long. The timestamp showed that whoever left that comment had posted it around 13 minutes into the video. At 13 minutes, I hadn't even reached the barefoot man's story yet. I checked the timeline. The first story in the video started much later. The comment wasn't reacting to anything I'd said yet, but it was perfectly tailored to what I was going to say. I refreshed. More comments poured in. One from someone claiming their CB radio sometimes cut to dead air, where they could hear somebody breathing. One from a woman who said she used to drive graveyard shifts and heard a voice calling her by a nickname she hadn't heard since her grandmother died. A guy said he'd seen a convoy once with all the lights off. And then there was another comment from the same grey account, same nonsense username. This one appeared farther down, buried among new replies. You remember me. No punctuation, no context, liked by exactly one other person. The like came from an account with no name at all, just a blank space where the username should be. I clicked through to the grey accounts page. It said the account had been created that day. No uploads, no subscriptions, no about text, no location, nothing. I closed the tab. That night the calls started again. Not unknown numbers anymore, normal-looking numbers, ones that could belong to real people in my city, ones one digit away from my own. It's impressive how many different ways a phone can make you feel watched. The way it lights up on a dark table, the way the vibration skitters across wood like something alive trying to get closer to your hand. The way a simple phrase on a lit screen can make you feel like your entire house suddenly grew windows you can't see. One text came through at the same time as a call, both from different numbers. The phone buzzed, screen lit, and I saw them stacked. Please answer, look behind you, don't answer had become my rule. Don't answer blocked calls. Don't answer unknown numbers. Don't feed it your voice. But the more I ignored them, the more insistent they got. The buzzing came in clusters, like somebody impatiently jabbing an elevator button. My entire body was vibrating by proxy. I grabbed the phone, opened the texting app, and for the first time, I didn't block the contact. I just typed back one word. No. I watched the typing bubble appear, disappear, appear again. For several long seconds, nothing came through. Then, finally, a reply arrived. You already did. The lights in my room flickered just once, small enough to blame on the power company, big enough to make my skin crawl. Somewhere outside, a semi downshifted, that deep grinding groan echoing between buildings. I'm not near a highway. I'm not even near a major road, but I heard it as clearly as if it were passing right under my window. I got up, walked to the glass, and pulled the curtains aside. The street below was empty. No trucks, no cars. Just a strip of asphalt glowing under a tired street lamp, and for one dizzy moment I thought I saw something standing dead center in the lane. Not a truck, not a person, a shape. Slightly too tall, slightly too thin, its edges fuzzy like it was standing behind a layer of heat shimmer. I blinked, and it was gone. Maybe it had never been there. Maybe my brain just filled the silence with something that made more sense than nothing. I went back to my desk and did something stupid. I opened the trash audio file, the one with the extra minutes, the engine, the voice. I told myself I'd listen one more time, analyze it like a professional. Break it down, prove to myself it was nothing. Once you understand something, it loses power, right? I hit play. The engine came first, low and steady like a heartbeat, that rumbling idle that says, massive vehicle standing still but ready to move. Under it, my own breathing, wispy and close, like my mouth was inches from the mic. Then something new. Over the engine, barely audible at first, were other sounds, little clanks. The shifting of weight on metal, the creak of a cabin seat. I heard a faint chuckle that definitely wasn't mine. A cough, and layered over it all, so subtle it felt like my brain was doing the work, a chorus of voices, all talking at once. I couldn't make out what they were saying at first. It sounded like what you'd hear if you stood in the middle of a crowded truck stop and closed your eyes. Laughter, complaints, directions, swearing, jokes, the mundane noise of people who spend their lives on the road, weaving their routines between exits and way stations and lonely gas pumps. But the longer I listened, the more the voices seemed to sync up, like they were finding a rhythm. The words sharpened, aligning into something that almost sounded like a chant. Not quite in unison, more like a crowd repeating a phrase at different speeds. You remember me. Some said it angrily. Some said it like a plea. Some said it like a threat. The phrase overlapped itself, multiple tones, multiple accents, all meaning the same sick, clinging thing. We refused to be forgotten. Then one voice rose above the rest, louder, closer, cutting through the pile like a horn blast. Come out and see us. The engine revved once, like a hand tapping on the accelerator. I felt the floor under my chair vibrate, though I knew the vibration wasn't real. My building isn't sitting on top of a garage. There was no truck under my apartment. My recording setup is nowhere near a road. I paused the track, fingers trembling. The room went quiet again. Or as quiet as it ever really gets, once you've noticed all the small sounds we usually tune out. The clock ticking, the faint refrigerator buzz, the tiny scratch inside the wall that could be pipes, could be an animal, could be your own imagination. The silence made it worse somehow, because in that silence I realized something. The extra minutes in that audio file hadn't been recorded when I was in the room. They were still being recorded. The timestamp on the file was updating, the seconds ticking forward even though I hadn't hit record. My screen showed the track growing slowly, as if someone had patched into my system and was feeding live sound into it. Something was recording, but it wasn't me. I yanked the power cable out of the interface. The screen froze. The waveform stopped. The sudden lack of that tiny, comforting LED glow on the mic made the room feel naked, exposed, like I just turned off the only light in a cave and remembered too late that I wasn't alone in it. My phone buzzed again. No number this time, no contact, just a notification that an app, one I use for uploading audio, had received a new file. Auto backup, it said. Successfully synced. My hands shook as I opened it. There, at the top of the list of files waiting to be published, was a new audio track I had not created. Its title wasn't something I would ever type. Live from the Cab. The thumbnail was just black. Not a missing preview, not an error, just a solid black square. The runtime matched the length of my original story, plus the extra minutes. It knew exactly how long my project was supposed to be. I stared at the play icon like it was a red button that might blow up something important. I didn't want to press it. I didn't want to hear what was on it. But I also didn't want it sitting there like a loaded gun on the table, waiting for somebody else to accidentally pull the trigger. Before I could decide, a small icon appeared in the corner. One listener. My breath caught. The file was live streaming. I hadn't started a stream. I hadn't hit any button, scheduled anything, set anything to public. But there it was, streaming. To someone. Somewhere. My speakers were off, but the stream was active. The number ticked up. 2 listeners. 5. 17. I unplugged the router. The little lights on the modem died. The room fell into that deep digital silence where even the air feels thicker. But on the screen, the stream didn't stop. The listener count climbed in slow, awful increments. Whatever was broadcasting through that file, it wasn't doing it through my internet. I closed the app, disabled it, uninstalled it. The screen went back to my desktop. Icons, wallpaper, normal life. I told myself that would be the end of it. No connection, no audience, no problem. Then my phone lit up again, this time with a flood of notifications from social media, all at once. Messages, tags, comments. I shouldn't have looked. The first person said they were listening to a special live version of my story from the cab of their truck, and that it felt too real, like the engine sounds matched their own. Someone else said they hadn't clicked anything, but their podcast app started playing a track titled "Live from the Cab" on its own. A third-person profile picture showing a guy in a reflective vest standing in front of a long white trailer wrote, "Bro WTF." The voice at the end said my name and told me to pull over. This some kind of interactive thing. I scrolled faster. More messages. More drivers talking about hearing their own CB chatter, twisted into something wrong, threaded under my narration. One said they heard a woman sobbing in the background, begging not to be left alone. Another swore they saw someone walking on the shoulder in their peripheral vision every time my voice paused. And then there were the ones who didn't sound scared at all. The ones who commented things like, "Finally, somebody's talking about what I see every night, and nice to not be the only one they walk with, and we hear you too." Those accounts all had the same blank look, no uploads, no activity, created the same day, sometimes with slight variations of the same username, sometimes copying names of real subscribers with one letter changed, like a reflection that didn't get the details quite perfect. I threw the phone on the bed, face down. It buzzed again, and again, and again. The sound turned into a constant low rattle like distant thunder. I sat down in front of the mic, even though everything in me screamed to stay away from it. If the stream had opened a door, I thought maybe I could close it by filling it with my own words, by taking control back. That's what I do, right? I tell the story before it tells itself. So I hit record. I started talking directly to the people hearing this. To you, not from a script, not from notes. Just from that raw, pulsing fear in my chest. I told you not to answer unknown voices, not to speak back when something calls your name from the static, not to let anything that knows you through devices you don't fully control. I told you about the barefoot man, and the road that shouldn't exist, and the featureless shape in the mirror. I told you all of this, hoping it would act like a vaccine, a warning. Something that would scare you enough to keep you from making the mistakes those drivers made. But the deeper truth is darker. Every time I say you, I can feel it getting closer. Every time you picture the things I describe, every time you lean a little closer to your screen or your steering wheel, every time the hair on your arms lifts at some detail that hits too close to home, it feels like something in the dark gets drawn toward that tiny spark of attention. Horror isn't neutral. Stories aren't neutral. They're invitations, doors, maps, and we've just spent a long time walking together down the same road. Somewhere out there right now, a driver is hearing this in their cab. The windows are fogged from their breath. Their headlights are carving two weak tunnels through a sea of black. The digital clock on their dash glows a color that doesn't exist in daytime. Their CB crackles, even though nobody's supposed to be on that frequency. In their rearview mirror, maybe they see nothing but the red eyes of their own taillights. Or maybe, if they let their eyes relax just a little too long, they'll see a line of trucks behind them, lights off, gliding. Somewhere else, someone is listening in bed, headphones in, convincing themselves that every creak is the house settling, that the engine rumble they hear under my voice is just some editing glitch, that the soft scrape that sounds like bare feet moving down the hallway outside their room is just the neighbor upstairs. Maybe that someone is you, and maybe you think you're safe because you're not on a highway, not in a cab, not behind a wheel. You're just sitting here, absorbing a scary story, letting it pass through your ears and out of your mind. But think about this. The thing that followed those truckers wasn't tied to asphalt. It was tied to attention, to memory, to the act of being seen, and then ignored. Every driver who saw it and drove away, every dispatcher who shrugged off a story, every cop who watched a dashcam clip and said glitch, every family member who rolled their eyes at a tale told over dinner, every dismissive reaction is still a kind of recognition. You can say you don't believe in something and still feed it with your focus. Tonight, when this ends, there's a chance you'll hear something you can't quite explain, a faint, distant idling from nowhere. A knock that doesn't match your appliances. A voice from another room where nobody is standing. There's a chance your phone will light up with a call from a number that looks almost like yours. There's a chance you'll see, just for a second, the impression of weight on the edge of your bed, the air bending like fabric where nothing should be sitting. If that happens, if any little part of what I've told you follows you out of this story and into your real life, remember the only rule that might matter. Don't talk back. Don't ask who's there. Don't say, I remember. Because if you do, if you give it that answer, if you let your own voice enter the conversation, you stop being just a listener. You join the line of people walking that endless shoulder, just out of sight, keeping pace with someone else who thinks they're alone. And the next time somebody like me leans into a microphone and starts collecting stories, you'll be on the other side of the static. Your feet will be bare. The road will be cold under you. And you'll be so desperate for somebody to finally answer when you whisper, "Can anyone hear me?" Oh, ChatGPT, Disa, the thing nobody tells you about being haunted is how boring most of it is. It's not all objects flying across rooms and doors slamming shut. Most of it is tiny. Little wrong details that you could explain away if you wanted to feel normal again. A smell that doesn't fit the place you're in. A sound that shouldn't be audible through the walls. A sense that someone just walked past you when you're sitting alone. For a while after that, live from the cab stream. That's what it was for me. Just wrong details. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and swear I heard chains rattling somewhere below my floor, like a trailer being hooked to a hitch. My apartment would smell faintly of diesel and cold metal when it was closed up tight and I hadn't been near a road all day. My computer fan would keep spinning long after I shut everything down, like it was trying to catch up to some invisible load. I could have stopped there, could have taken it as a warning and pulled back, deleted the files, closed the channel, gone back to pretending horror was something I kept on the other side of a screen. Instead, I made the mistake of checking my email. At the top of my inbox was a new message with no subject, no sender name, just an address made of numbers and one word, cab. I almost deleted it without opening. Almost. Curiosity is a disease for people like me. Inside there was only a single line of text and an attachment. The text said, "This is what happens when they answer." The attachment was an audio file. No description, no tags, just a timestamp. That same early morning window every story kept circling back to. I downloaded it without thinking, then stared at the icon on my desktop for a long time, fighting with myself. I told myself I wouldn't play it, that whatever was on there, I didn't need it in my head. I hit play anyway. At first, it was just road noise. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump of tires hitting those tiny seams in the asphalt. A low engine hum. A radio faint in the background. Someone talking about weather 100 miles away. It sounded like any random dash recording from any truck on any highway. Then the voice came in, not a ghost voice, a normal one, human, tired. "Just checking in," the man said. "If you're hearing this, I guess I hit send. This is Mike. You know who I am by the handle, I guess. I'm on the southbound, running third shift. Got your story playing in the background. Creepy shit, man." I froze. The timbre of his voice, the way he said "man," the little half laugh. He sounded just like dozens of guys who'd messaged me before. Just another driver, killing time with a story. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. "I'm not really the type to scare easy," he went on. "I've seen wrecks, real ones. I've watched people do worse things to themselves than any ghost could. But I don't know. Something about this one. The barefoot dude, the convoy with no lights, the way you talk about the road listening back. It's getting in my head a little." He laughed again, but it was thinner this time. "Anyway, I just wanted to send this in case something happens so somebody hears it if—" He cut himself off. There was a pause. The engine noise continued. The tires kept their steady rhythm. Underneath, a shift, a subtle change in tone, like the air in the cab had grown heavier. "You hear that?" he whispered. I didn't, not at first. I turned my volume up. The CB crackled, static, then the faint rise and fall of another voice talking too far away to make out. Routine, the noise of the job. Then, slipping under it, another sound. Footsteps, not on gravel, not on concrete, on metal. Slow, deliberate steps, like someone walking along a catwalk. You could hear the hollow ring of each one, slightly muffled by whatever surface the mic was on. "They're on the catwalk," Mike said, voice low and tight. "Nobody's supposed to be on the catwalk when I'm moving." He started breathing harder. You could hear his hand hit plastic, fumbling for the radio, then think better of it, and just grip the wheel instead. Another step, closer. "If this is you screwing with the sound man," he said, a note of anger creeping in to cover the fear. "It's not funny. I can hear it right next to my head, like they're walking right over the sleeper." The footsteps reached the end of whatever they were walking on. There was a pause that stretched too long, a shift in weight, metal creaking in a slow, bending way that made my teeth ache. Then a new sound, one I recognized immediately because I'd heard drivers describe it in interviews. A drag. Not walking now, something being pulled, something heavy scraping along metal. Mike swore under his breath. No. I didn't pull over. I didn't stop. There's nowhere out here to stop." The radio clicked. Static surged, rose, then cleared in a way that didn't sound like physics. It sounded like a curtain being pulled aside. Then, through the CB, a voice said his name. Not driver, not his handle. His full name, first and last, said in a tone that belonged to someone who'd known him for years. His breathing stuttered. "Mom?" Every part of me clenched up. My skin felt too small for my body. The voice on the CB sounded like a woman in her 50s, tired, kind. "Baby, you need to pull over," she said. "You're not safe." Mike's voice broke. "You can't, Mom, you're—" "Just pull over," she insisted, gentle but urgent. Right now, honey." The engine noise shifted as he eased off the accelerator. You could hear the turn signal clicking. The rumble strip on the shoulder made that stuttering roar under the tires. "I don't see anywhere to stop," he said, panic creeping in. "It's just darkness. There's nothing out here." In a second," the voice promised. "You'll see a light. When you do, pull in, don't drive past it. Do you understand me?" He nodded audibly more than he answered, a small "yeah" under his breath. I could hear the faint shimmer of tears in his voice now. The disbelief and desperate hope fighting in his throat. A moment passed, then another. "There's nothing," he whispered. "It's just road." The voice on the CB grew softer. "Trust me. You know my voice, don't you?" He made a choked sound. "Yeah, I know your voice." "Then pull in when you see the light." There was a long stretch of road noise, wind, static, the creak of the cab. I almost thought the file had frozen. Then Mike made a small, surprised sound. "There," he said. "Right side. Is that—" You could hear it in the recording. A faint glow somewhere ahead, cutting a weak rectangle into the black. Like a tiny station or lot, just barely illuminated. A safe harbor in the dark. "That's it," the voice said. "Pull in. Don't think about it, just do it." He guided the truck off the main lane. You could hear the crunch of gravel under the tires now, the engine straining a bit as he slowed. The sound of his turn signal stopped. The wind died down. "There's no sign," he muttered. "No pumps, no building, just— What is this place?" The engine idled. The audio picked up that hollow, lonely vibration of a large machine sitting still in an empty space. "Turn off the engine," his mother's voice said. He obeyed. When the key clicked and the rumble cut out, the silence that followed was almost painful. Just the faint tick of cooling metal, the faraway rush of wind over nothing. "Mom," he whispered. "Where am I?" There was no answer. The CB stayed dead. No static, no signal. Just a dead piece of hardware hanging from a clip. Then, outside the cab, something knocked on his door. Not politely, not hard, just two slow, careful taps. Tock. "Tock." "Who is it?" he asked. "Because that's what humans do. We answer. We interact." I wanted to reach into the recording and stop him. The knocking came again, 2 taps, lower this time, almost at the level of his knee. "Hello?" he said louder. "You all right out there?" Silence. Then from right beside his ear, too close to be on the other side of the glass, a whisper. "I knew you'd answer." The audio burst into noise, screaming feedback, engine roar, the squeal of tires over gravel, the wild clatter of something loose hitting metal. I dragged the progress bar back, turned the volume down, hit play again. Under the chaos, for just a moment, I heard Mike's voice. "Get off! I'm sorry, The rest of the words were drowned out by a sound I haven't heard anywhere else before or since. A wet, stretching sound, like something thick and invisible was being pulled out of something else, like a seatbelt being yanked from a body you can't see. Then it all cut to dead air. No engine, no breathing, nothing. The track kept going for another 37 minutes of pure silence. When it finally ended, my speakers popped softly and went quiet, leaving me alone with my pulse beating in my ears. I closed the media player and sat there with my hands on my knees, fingers digging into the fabric of my pants hard enough to hurt. That file wasn't fake. You can tell when people stage things. They overdo the reactions. They forget tiny, real-world sounds. They steal effects from movies. This wasn't that. This was raw, messy, full of those little unplanned noises your body makes when you're scared, those half sobs, the damp hitch in your throat, the instinctive way your voice goes small when you're trying not to attract attention. I checked the email header. No trace, no sender info, no route, like it had been sent from somewhere that wasn't on our networks. I should have stopped everything then, should have pulled the plug on all of it. It was one thing when this was just stories. It was another when the stories started sending me evidence. Instead, I made my worst decision. I went live. I told myself I was doing it to warn people, to share what I'd heard before it could just vanish into my hard drive like it never existed. I set up the stream. I tested my levels. I hovered over the button for a long time. Before I started, I made one rule. I wouldn't take calls. No live voice chat. No CB-style interaction. Just text. Just me talking, you listening. Safe enough, right? When the counter ticked into 3 digits, I started speaking. I told you some version of what I've just told you now. I played a small, sanitized part of the audio. I watched the chat flood with reactions, jokes, nervous laughter, confessions from drivers who'd seen or heard similar things. It felt almost normal. Then the chat stopped, not all at once, not in a sudden cut. It just slowed. The flow of messages went from a constant blur of text to a trickle. Here and there, someone would comment or anyone else lagging? But the wall of reactions dried up. My viewer count didn't drop. It climbed. 400, 600, 900. Almost none of them were talking. In the corner of the screen, usernames started appearing and disappearing too quickly to read, joining and leaving like a list of ghosts passing through a doorway. I cleared my throat. Chat, you guys still there? For a moment, nothing. Then a single message popped up. "We're listening." It was from an account with my channel name. I stared at it, confused. I don't type in my own chat. I don't have a bot that says that. I looked at the list of users. My own name was there twice. The second one had no profile picture. Another message came in right underneath. Keep going, more usernames. New ones I didn't recognize. Handles that looked almost like real ones, but slightly bent, like photocopies of photocopies. You ever seen a word you know suddenly look wrong, like you spelled it wrong even though you didn't? The chat felt like that, familiar but crooked. I tried to impose normality on it, laughed awkwardly. Okay, weird glitch. Anyway, like I was saying, as I talked, I noticed a new line of text appear, then another, all from different accounts, all saying the same thing. We remember. Some added extra letters. Some used numbers instead of words, but the message was the same. I felt something cold press against the back of my neck. Not a breeze, not a draft, a pressure. I reached back without thinking, fingers expecting to feel the wall. They hit air. My chair was no longer as close to the wall as I thought. Had I rolled forward? On the monitor, the tiny preview box that showed my face froze for a second, then glitched. For one frame, I caught a glimpse of something over my shoulder, not a full figure, just a suggestion. The impression of a shape where there should only be shadow, taller than me, leaning in, no eyes, no mouth, just that same collapse of features into a smooth wrongness, like skin stretched over emptiness. Then it was gone. Half the chat spammed emojis and WTF was that? The other half went back to the same phrase. We remember my viewer count ticked past 1,000. Something cracked in me then. I stopped trying to pretend it was fine, stopped trying to treat it like a spooky fun stream. I leaned into the mic, voice low, and said exactly what I was thinking. If you're not supposed to be here, I said, you need to leave. This isn't your place. The second the words left my mouth, I knew I'd messed up. I wasn't talking to the viewers anymore. I was talking to whatever had leaned in behind me. The stream lagged hard. The chat froze altogether. My own image stuttered, turned into jagged lines of pixels, then snapped back into clarity. For a heartbeat, I saw myself on screen, but I wasn't alone. In the reflection of my own eyes, there were headlights, not the bright white LED of modern cars, the dull, sickly yellow of old halogen bulbs buried in grime. They were behind me, inside me, pointed down some road I couldn't see. Cut the stream, I told myself, out loud, into the mic. I wanted my hands to move. They didn't. The viewer count climbed. It kept ticking up slowly like trucks joining a line. Finally, mercifully, the screen went black on its own. The software crashed. My computer whined, fans spinning up hard, then died. The room plunged into darkness thick enough to chew. Silence. Utter, heavy silence. Then, from somewhere very close to my left ear, a whisper. We're already here. I don't remember getting out of the chair. I don't remember crossing the room. I do remember ending up in the hallway, back pressed to the cool wall, phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline. No lights. No hum from electronics. No sound of traffic from outside. The whole building felt paused, like someone had pressed a universal mute button on everything but my own breathing. My phone screen lit my face a sick blue. Notifications stacked up faster than I could read them. New comments, new emails, new followers. One notification stood out because it wasn't from any app. A system alert. New Bluetooth device nearby, CB47. Would you like to connect? I don't own any Bluetooth devices called that. I don't own a CB radio. I'm nowhere near a mile marker 47. My thumb hovered over cancel. The little spinning icon danced like it was waiting for my decision. In the quiet, I heard it again. The faint, distant sound of an engine turning over, not out on the street, somewhere below me, or above me, or inside the walls. It revved once, twice, like someone was impatient. The phone vibrated again. The CB47 prompt vanished, replaced by a simple incoming call screen. No caller ID. The accept and decline buttons glowed at the bottom, red and green. I knew what the safe choice was. Decline, always decline, don't answer, don't talk back. But here's the worst, most human truth. The more something tells you not to do a thing, the louder the part of your brain gets that wants to see what happens if you do. I'd spent this whole time telling other people not to pick up. My thumb slid toward the green. For half a second it hovered there. Then, at the last moment, I did the only smart thing I'd done all night. I put the phone flat on the floor. I walked away. I went into the bathroom, shut the door, sat in the bathtub with my knees pulled up, and stayed there while the call rang and rang and rang in the other room. The sound was muffled through the walls, but I could still hear it. That insistent, shrill tone, over and over. It rang for a long time. Too long. Phones aren't supposed to ring that long. Just when I thought it would finally stop, it did something worse. The ringing cut off mid-tone, replaced by a click and then a rush of sound, like wind slamming into a microphone. The call had connected by itself. No voice came through, just that wind, and under it, faint but unmistakable, the layers of engine noise and CB static and something heavy dragging along metal. Then, cutting through all of it, my own voice, over and over and over. Can anyone hear me? Can anyone hear me? Can anyone hear me? My mouth was closed, my throat was tight, I wasn't saying a word. But there I was, calling out from a place I hadn't been yet. The sound grew louder, as if whatever was on the other end of that call was getting closer, closing the distance between where it was and where I was hiding. I don't know how long I stayed curled in that tub. Long enough for the call to end, long enough for the phone battery to start dying, long enough for the first grey hints of morning to seep around the edges of the blinds. When I finally opened the bathroom door, the apartment looked exactly the same. Computer off, mic still, chair pushed back a few inches from where I remembered leaving it. Phone lying, screen down on the floor, quiet. I walked over and picked it up. The call log said I'd been on the line for 1 hour and 45 minutes. Exactly the length of the story I'd recorded. Exactly the length of what you've just heard. There was one new voicemail. I haven't listened to it, I won't, because I know, without needing to press play, what's on it. Not their voices, mine, and maybe yours. Because here's the scariest part of all of this, the thing that's crawled into my head and refused to leave. You're not just listening to a horror story, you're finishing one. Every beat of fear, every image you've built in your mind, every time your eyes flick toward a dark part of your room just to make sure nothing was there, that's part of it. The story needed you, needed someone on the other end to make it real. So before this ends, do me one favor. When you turn this off, when the room goes quiet, or the road ahead of you empties, or the app closes and your screen goes dark, don't say anything. Don't laugh to yourself. Don't say, that wasn't so bad. Or don't whisper I remember as a joke. Because if you do, if you let those words out, if you give whatever's been pacing just out of sight that little acknowledgement it's been waiting for, it might decide you're ready for the next part. The part where the call connects by itself. The part where the engine you hear isn't in your headphones anymore. The part where, from somewhere very close behind you, a familiar voice leans in and asks, in a tone that sounds exactly like someone you miss, "Can anyone hear me?" I kept talking anyway. Not out loud, not into a mic, just inside my own head, the way you do when you're trying not to think about something and end up thinking about nothing else. I told myself the same lies everyone tells when they've seen too much. It was stress. It was the algorithm. It was burnout. It was sleep deprivation. I tried to pack everything that had happened into a box labeled weird glitch and shove it onto a shelf in my mind. But every time I reached for something normal, that box shook. The first real crack wasn't even supernatural. It was an email. The subject line was, "You don't know me, but you know my brother." The sender's name looked real, not like those nonsense strings or blank accounts. It came from a woman with a common last name and a profile picture of a kid on a bicycle, face half turned away from the camera. The body of the email was long, but there were 2 sentences that hooked into me and didn't let go. "He died in his truck 2 nights ago. Your video was still playing when they found him. I read it 3 times before the words made sense as a full thought instead of separate punches." She went on to explain. They'd been trying to call him. He wasn't answering. The company got worried, pinged the truck. They found it on the shoulder of some no-name road. Engine off, lights off, driver slumped against the window. No visible injury, no sign of a struggle, just gone. His phone was still in the cup holder, screen cracked from hitting something. The app he used to listen was open. My thumbnail sat there, frozen on the last frame. The progress bar all the way at the end. "I don't blame you," she wrote. "I know it's not your fault. I just need to understand why. When I scrolled his history, there were your stories and then these other ones. Titles I don't recognize. I can't open them. They say they're corrupted, but they have your voice on the thumbnails." She ended with a question. "Did you post anything called Road Won't Let Me Go? Or 47 miles with no exit? They're all the same length as your last upload." I stared at the screen so long my eyes burned. Then I opened a new tab and checked my channel. No extra videos, no secret uploads, no hidden streams, just the ones I knew I'd made, lined up like teeth. But when I opened the creator dashboard, the part normal viewers never see, I noticed something that made my fingers go numb. Under the Live section, there was an entry labeled Archived Stream. No thumbnail, no title, just a length. 1:45. I clicked it before I could talk myself out of it. The overview page loaded with a stutter, like my computer didn't really want to show it. Viewer graph, chat replay toggle, average watch time, all the usual stats, except the chat replay button was grayed out and the viewer graph looked wrong. It was flat. Most streams spike at the start, dip in the middle, maybe bump at the end. This one was a straight line, slowly rising, as if people had trickled in at a perfectly steady pace the entire time. At the bottom, it showed the peak concurrent viewers, 5,047. I didn't remember that many. My screen had never shown that number. The counter I'd seen had capped much lower, but the system had logged it. Under that, there was a list labeled Top Chatters. Only 3 names. All of them were variations of my own. Same handle, different small changes, an extra underscore, a missing letter, a space where there shouldn't be one. Each one had sent exactly one message. We remember something cold slid down my spine and settled at the base, like ice melting between vertebrae. I closed the tab. I didn't answer the woman's email. What was I supposed to say? Sorry your brother died. By the way, the thing that might have killed him is listening right now. Any words I put down felt like I'd be inviting whatever had crawled out of my audio to look at her family too. So I did nothing. That didn't stop them from finding me elsewhere. Messages started coming from accounts I hadn't seen before, but the styles blurred together. Some were long and rambling, people purging fear into paragraphs. Some were a single sentence. I thought I was alone on the highway until your voice stopped, and something else kept breathing through my speakers. My favorite part was about the ghost convoy. I think I saw them once. They didn't have cabs, just trailers. Who pulls them? I listened in my living room with my kids asleep in the next room, and when you talked about the knocking on the door, I heard it on our front door too. Exactly the same way. Mixed in with those were screenshots, grainy, badly lit photos of roads, mirrors, cramped truck interiors. At first glance they looked like nothing. But if you zoomed in, if you let your mind relax and your eyes drift, there were shapes in them. A smear of lighter grey in the reflection of a windshield where no passenger should be. An extra set of hands on a steering wheel. A bare foot halfway through the frame, hovering slightly above the floor, with no leg attached. I told myself not to look too closely, but humans are monkeys with better phones. We poke at things that hurt us just to see if they still hurt. One photo stuck with me. It was taken from the driver's seat of a cab parked in an empty lot. The dashboard lights were all lit, painting the interior in sickly green. Outside, the world was a flat black. In the distance, just barely visible in the reflection, was a line of lights. They looked like small points at first. Stars, maybe, if stars lined up neatly in 2 rows and never wavered. When you zoomed in, you could see they were headlights. Dozens of them. No bodies behind them. No trucks. No cars. Just pairs of lights, glowing, hovering inches off the ground, all pointed in the same direction. At the bottom of the screenshot, the user had typed, "They're waiting for something. I think it's you." I stopped scrolling after that. Days blurred into each other. I ate whatever I could, microwave. I slept in bursts, half awake and listening for engines that shouldn't be near my building. Sometimes I'd jolt upright, convinced someone had whispered from the doorway, only to find the apartment empty. My own voice echoing in my head from old recordings. The worst was the quiet. The calls had stopped. The texts slowed. The comments leveled off. The channel stats didn't crash, didn't spike. They just turned steady, consistent. A slow, unbroken line. Like something had settled in. The calm scared me more than the noise. It felt like being watched by something patient. Then came the package. No return address. No sender. Just my name, written in black marker across the top of a padded envelope that smelled faintly like rain-soaked cardboard and cigarette smoke. I should have thrown it away. There is no horror story in history where opening the mysterious package goes well. I opened it anyway. Inside was a dash cam. Not new. The casing was scuffed. One corner had a spiderweb crack. There was dust ground into the seams, the kind that never fully comes out after years of riding on the windshield of something that never stops moving. There was also a note, folded once, no greeting. "You like stories." This one recorded itself. The bottom of the note had a single word: "Sorry." The dashcam had a memory card in it, small, black, ordinary. Mundane in that awful way objects can be, when you know they've seen something your brain isn't built to hold. I sat there for a long time, the card in one hand, the note in the other. Then I took the card and slid it into the adapter on my computer. There were dozens of files, short clips, images of roads, parking lots, blurred faces in truck stop windows, normal, boring stuff. The machine had just done its job, captured, stored, forgotten. Only one file was different. It had no timestamp, no date, no size listed, just a title, auto-generated by the device. DCAM ZO 1000. I opened it. The video began like any dashcam footage. The camera was pointed through a windshield, the horizon bouncing slightly with every minor bump in the road. It was night outside. The sky was the kind of blank, impenetrable black you only get in places too flat and too empty to bother reflecting light. The speedometer visible at the bottom showed the truck was moving fast. Not recklessly, but fast enough that the lane markers whipped past in regular, hypnotic flashes. For a while, nothing happened. Just the road, the hum of tires, the faint shuffle of the driver adjusting his grip on the wheel. No radio, no music. After almost a full minute, a sound entered the audio that didn't belong. My voice. "You're not just listening to a horror story," it said, slightly muffled, like it was coming from a phone on the dash. "You're finishing one." My skin crawled. This was my recording. I knew exactly where in the script that line sat, somewhere far into the video, toward the end. But on the dashcam, the progress bar at the bottom showed the clip was just beginning. The camera picked up a reflection in the glass, just enough of the cab interior to see the driver's outline. Broad shoulders, a cap, stubble on a jaw. He didn't react to my voice, didn't crack a smile, or roll his eyes like people do when they listen to something creepy to stay awake. His hands were tight on the wheel, his shoulders up around his ears. He was already scared. "And maybe, just maybe, something out there has noticed you listening," my recorded voice went on, as the road ahead dipped slightly. Headlights swept down the slope and painted something on the horizon. For a moment I thought it was a city, little points of light in a cluster. Then the camera angle shifted and I realized they were perfectly aligned. Pairs, headlights again, dozens, maybe more. They were parked on some parallel road out in the dark, matching the driver's speed, all pointed toward him. He muttered something under his breath. The microphone didn't catch it, but the way his shoulders jerked said it wasn't a prayer or a joke. My voice kept talking. "The part where the engine you hear isn't in your headphones anymore." The truck's engine faltered. Not much, just a small stutter, like something had sucked a little air out of the fuel line. Enough to make the speedometer dip for a second, then recover. Outside, the other lights flared, brightening in unison for a heartbeat before dimming back to their sickly glow. The driver's hand darted to something near the camera. The audio picked up the hollow plastic click of him hitting the CB. "Anyone else out here seeing this?" he asked. "Come on, guys. This some kind of meetup?" I didn't get the memo. The CB crackled. No real voices answered, just static. Then under it the faint rise and fall of breath that wasn't his. He reached forward, turned the knob, killed the sound. The cab went quieter. My voice kept narrating, now badly out of sync with the reality I was watching. The part where, from somewhere very close behind you, a familiar voice leans in and asks. The headlights ahead blinked out, not like someone flipped a switch, like eyes closing. For a few seconds, the road ahead was utterly black. No reflectors, no line markings, no horizon. The truck's own beams seemed to vanish into nothing. The driver cursed, hit the high beams, hit them again. On the third hit, the road came back, closer, The camera showed the lane ending in a jagged break where the pavement had been carved away. Beyond it was empty air and darkness. No warning signs, no cones, no barriers, just a cliff where roadway should be. The driver's hands jerked the wheel on instinct, but this wasn't a movie where you see the truck lurch and spin and tumble. The dashcam shook, the frame tilted, and for half a second it caught something in the side mirror, not the driver's face, not the trailer. A tall, smooth shape running alongside the cab, keeping perfect pace, hand pressed against the metal as if guiding it. Then the video collapsed into a smear of motion, the way footage does when something hits much faster than the sensor can handle. There was a crack, glass, plastic, bone, all at once. And then nothing. No smash cut, no explosion. Just a hard, total stop. The timer on the clip kept ticking for a while. Black screen, no sound. Then, very faintly, something breathed right up against the dash cam mic. "You remember me." Not accusing, not begging, bright with satisfaction. The file ended there. I sat back, every muscle in my body locked. I knew, in a way that bypassed logic and settled directly into my bones, that this had not been sent to me to scare me away. It was an invitation, not from the dead driver. From whatever had been pacing his truck when the road ran out. It wanted me to see what happens when someone listens too far. It wanted me to understand that the stories didn't just talk about it, they were how it moved. When I closed the player, my desktop background flickered. For a heartbeat, the wallpaper, the neutral, boring image I'd chosen months ago, was replaced by a still frame from the video I hadn't paused on. My own face, reflected faintly in the dashcam glass, eyes wide, mouth open, like I'd been leaning into the lens the whole time, whispering the lines. I blinked, and it was gone. You can say that was a glitch. You can say I imagined it. You can say all of this is just the run-on nightmare of someone who spent too many nights chasing cheap adrenaline through ghost stories. But here's what I can't explain away. The voicemail is still on my phone. I haven't deleted it. I haven't listened to it. The timestamp shows it was left before I ever started recording the story you're hearing. The duration matches it exactly, down to the second. Sometimes when the world is quiet and my resolve is thin, I hover my thumb over the play button and think about what I'd hear. Maybe it's just static. Maybe it's my own voice telling this entire story back to me. Maybe it's something else entirely. Maybe it's silence, and the real recording is happening on the other side. Every time someone presses play on this and lets the sound of my voice, and the things following it, into whatever space they think is safe. You want the truth. The only reason I haven't deleted that voicemail is because I'm afraid that's the real trigger. As long as it's there, unplayed, unresolved, it feels like a sealed door. If I erase it, I'll never know what was behind it. And things that are locked out for too long tend to find another way in. So I keep telling the story instead. I spread it out between us like a thin, fragile bridge, hoping that if enough people share the weight, the cracks will spread and the things underneath will be too busy pressing their faces to the gaps to claw their way through. Maybe that's wishful thinking. Maybe this is exactly what it wants. You, listening, repeating it in your head, replaying the details later when you're alone. Scanning the shoulder of the road when you're driving before dawn, just to be sure there's nobody pacing your car. Glancing in your mirror a little too long, jumping when your phone buzzes from an unknown number and thinking, for a split second, about what might happen if you picked up and heard your own voice, asking if anyone could hear you. I can't stop you from doing any of that. I can't stop it from trying to use your imagination the way it used mine. All I can do is leave you with this final, ugly, necessary thought. If after all of this, you still decide to answer when something calls from the dark, if you pick up when the road itself seems to be ringing you in the quiet hours, if you lean toward a speaker because you think you recognize the voice coming through the static, don't say you weren't warned. Don't act surprised when the line doesn't disconnect. Don't act surprised when you realize you're not just hearing a story. You're being added to it, and somewhere, on some forgotten stretch of highway that doesn't exist on any map, a barefoot shape will turn its head toward an empty lane, smile with a face it learned from your memories, and start walking in step with you, waiting for you to notice, waiting for you to whisper back, "I remember you." I tried to outwait it. That was my plan. If you can call curling up around your own fear like a wounded animal a plan. I stopped opening new emails. I turned off notifications. I let messages pile up in little red numbers on my apps like drops of dried blood. I told myself that as long as I didn't poke at any of it, it couldn't poke back. For a while, it even seemed to work. The nights were still wrong, but they weren't escalating. I still woke up to the faint smell of diesel for no reason. I still caught myself flinching at the distant low growl of trucks on the highway, even when I was nowhere near a highway. But the calls didn't come as often. The weird accounts commenting, "We remember," slowed. The world didn't fall apart. There's a particular kind of dread that comes with that kind of calm. It feels less like safety and more like something inhaling slowly, preparing to speak. I kept working my normal job, ate normal food, talked about normal things with people who had no idea what I'd been doing alone at night, whispering into a mic about things that don't fit inside daylight. I even convinced myself, for a thin stretch of days, that the story had run its course. People had listened, been scared, moved on. Algorithms would bury it eventually. Traffic would die. The road would forget my name. And then, one evening, my power went out. No storm, no transformer pop, no warning. Just a soft click, and the whole apartment exhaled into darkness. I stood there in the sudden quiet, phone in my hand, listening. The refrigerator hum cut out. The computer fans faded. The usual low electrical buzz that lives inside walls and outlets and chargers, the one you never notice until it's gone, vanished. In that vacuum, something else became audible. A very faint, very distant idling. It sounded like it was below the building, under the foundation, deep in the concrete. That heavy, uneven thrum of a big engine sitting in neutral, vibrating through the structure like a heartbeat buried under skin. I told myself it was someone in the alley, a delivery truck, some late-night loading dock I'd never noticed. I told myself a lot of things while I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The street was black, not dim, not underlit. Black. The power outage had hit the whole block, maybe more. No street lamps, no lit windows, no red dots from routers or blinking crossing signals, just my reflection in the glass, and behind it, a city that had vanished into a single flat, dark surface. The idling got louder, not close enough to rattle the glass, just enough to be undeniable now. A physical thing pressing up through the soles of my feet. My phone vibrated, active even with the Wi-Fi dead. One new notification, voicemail. For a second, my lungs forgot what they were supposed to do. It wasn't a new message. The symbol next to it wasn't the little red dot that says one new. It was the old one, the one that had been sitting there for days, untouched. Somehow in the dark, it had become the brightest thing in the room. The notification expanded on its own. The screen showed the same line it always had. One voicemail, unknown caller. I'd seen it 100 times already and managed to walk away. This time, there was something new under it. Play now? The idling in the bones of the building deepened, rose, like whoever was down there had eased their foot onto the gas, just a little. I could have put the phone down, gone outside. Walked until I saw light again, knocked on a neighbor's door with some excuse about checking the breakers, done literally anything other than what I did. Instead, I sat down on the floor. The dark had weight, pressing against the windows, pooling in the corners of the room. My phone screen glowed on my lap like a tiny artificial campfire. Every horror story I'd ever consumed should have told me to get up, to run, to refuse. Curiosity again. It's the oldest predator on the road. I tapped the notification. The voicemail screen opened. Same timestamp, same duration, 1:45 Hume, same caller, unknown, same little triangular play icon. For a moment, my thumb just hovered there. My heart pounded in my throat so hard, it felt like someone knocking softly on the inside of my ribs. The building shook faintly. Plaster dusted my shoulder from the ceiling. The engine below revved once. I hit play. Silence. Not like a muted recording. Not dead air. It was a kind of silence that somehow carried sound inside it, a pressure that made my ears ring. I could hear my own breathing very clearly, the tiny shuffle of my clothes, the minuscule tap of my pulse in my neck. I realized, slowly, that wasn't coming from my body in the room. It was coming from the voicemail. The first voice I heard was my own. It wasn't from the start of the story. It wasn't the introduction, the calm explanation, the "I used to think trucker stories were just stories" part. It was me now, my voice saying, just as I had a few seconds earlier, I hit play. Layered under that, slightly out of sync, my voice from earlier nights. The story about Coleman and the barefoot man, Elliot's CB, Ria's mile marker 47, Jean's passenger, Hal's convoy, my ride with Marla, the stream collapsing, they all played at once. Not stacked perfectly like an audio engineer layered them, but tangled, overlapping, fragments of sentences crossing other fragments. A swarm of my own narration, turned into a language made of fear and engines and names. Then other voices joined. The truckers I'd interviewed, the ones who'd emailed me, a woman sobbing an apology to her brother, saying she'd told him the stories were stupid and now he was gone. A man angrily telling me it was just fiction, and then 2 layers deeper the same man in a smaller voice describing waking up to see someone sitting on his sleeper bunk, bending the mattress. You. I don't mean some specific person you know, I mean the composite you, dozens of different voices, male, female, old, young, saying, "I'm listening from," followed by states, countries, city names, mile markers, people throwing their locations into the dark like breadcrumbs, wanting to be seen. Over all of it, like a tone only some part of my brain could hear, there was a low, amused breath, not laughing, just pleased. The floor shook again, harder. Somewhere in the building, something heavy fell. I heard a distant shout, then nothing. The voicemail kept playing. It reached a point where my own voice in the recording said, "You're not just listening to a horror story, you're finishing one." And then, perfectly timed to meet it, a second voice spoke on top of mine. "I know," it said. "You did good." I had never recorded that sentence. The voice wasn't one I recognized from any interview, any call, any message. It sounded the way road noise would sound if it learned how to talk. Flat, rough around the edges, too wide, like it came from more than one throat at once. The engine below revved hard enough to rattle a glass in the kitchen cabinet. My phone got hot in my hand. The screen flickered once, twice, then the standard voicemail interface dissolved, replaced by a black screen with a single line of white text. "Thank you for carrying them." My stomach turned over. The text blurred, rearranged itself. "Thank you for carrying us." Some instinct, deeper than fear, kicked in. The same one that makes animals bite through traps to get free. The idea of being we, with whatever was on the other end of this line, made something in me rebel so hard I could taste metal. I jammed my thumb at the screen, trying to close the app. It didn't respond. My reflection looked back at me in the black, stretched and warped by the curved glass. For a second, I saw something behind it. 2 dim yellow lights, right where my eyes should be. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor and kept playing. "Don't fight it," the road voice said from the speaker. "You opened the lane. You turned on the lights. They can see where to go now." "I didn't invite anyone," I hissed, which was a stupid thing to say to a piece of plastic on the floor, but the alternative was screaming. The voices in the voicemail shifted, like a crowd turning in unison to look at me. "You told their stories," it replied, still calm, still horribly reasonable. "You made them roads." The floor under me lurched, not enough to throw me, but enough to tell my brain that up and down weren't as stable as they used to be. The building wasn't being shaken. It was being carried. I stumbled to the window and tore the curtains back. We were moving. My apartment was sliding through darkness, not up, not down, not sideways, just away, away from everything. The city lights that should have been visible in the distance weren't there. No other buildings, no street, just black stretching in all directions, and directly ahead, a faint double line of white that looked very much like painted lane markers rushing under us. The engine sound roared now, not from below, from everywhere, the walls, the ceiling, the void outside. The voicemail said conversationally, "You're in the cab now." I backed away from the window, heart punched into my throat. "No," I said. "No, I'm not. I'm in my apartment. This is my home. This is cargo," it corrected. "Home is something you can choose to leave. Cargo goes where it's hauled." The air grew thick, harder to pull into my lungs. Every breath felt like inhaling exhaust. I realized with a nauseating drop in my gut that I could taste the road, that hot, dusty chemical flavor of old asphalt, the ghost of rubber and oil and everything else that ever hit it hard enough to leave a mark. The phone on the floor crackled. Through the layers of sound, through the chaos, something else came through, softer, familiar, my own voice. "Don't say you weren't warned," it repeated, like a loop. "Don't say you weren't warned." The road voice talked over it. "You wanted an ending," it said. "They always do. Drivers, listeners, they want to know where the story stops, where the road stops. The truth is, it doesn't. It just runs out of map." The walls of my apartment went thin around the edges, colors leaching out of objects, the couch, the books, the desk. All of it looked like someone had turned down the opacity. Beyond them, something else was taking shape. A windshield, a pale suggestion of a dashboard, the faint reflected outline of a steering wheel. For one nauseous second, I saw my own hands on it. "You're not supposed to be here," I whispered, not sure if I meant me or it. It chuckled without humor. "I've always been here," it answered. "You're the one who kept shining a light on me, checking your mirrors, hitting record, let them look, let them think they're safe because you're between them and me." I thought of every night I'd sat in front of the mic, telling myself I was a buffer, a storyteller, a wall between listeners and the things that scared them, a controlled burn. The engine shuddered like it was shifting gears. "What happens if I stop?" I asked. "If I never tell another story?" The road voice considered. Outside in the darkness beyond the dissolving walls, I could see other shapes moving now. Big, boxy silhouettes, sliding along in parallel lines, some a little ahead, some a little behind, their headlights unlit, their trailers impossibly still, gliding with a grace something that size shouldn't have. "Convoy, you won't stop," it said finally. "Even if you never post again, they'll tell it. You opened the frequency. You tuned them in. They'll talk to each other, to themselves, to me. That's all a road is, a story that learned how to carry weight." The thought landed with horrible clarity. Even if I destroyed every file, every drive, every account, the people who'd heard the story still had it inside their heads. They'd tell their partners, their friends, their audiences. A driver in a lot somewhere would scare another driver with "that one story I heard." Someone would half remember my words and reinvent the rest. You can't unpave a highway once enough heavy things have passed over it, but maybe you could at least pour a barricade across one section. My phone buzzed against the floor, still playing the voicemail like a tire that refuses to stop staring as it spins. I grabbed it. The screen was a mess of static and my own distorted reflection, but the controls at the bottom still worked. Pause. Delete. "That won't do what you think it will," the road voice murmured, close enough now that it felt like it was speaking through my own teeth. I believed it, but I also believed I had to do something. Light, if you can call it that, flared at the edges of the world, like we were rushing toward some oncoming glow in the distance. Not dawn, not headlights, something bigger. "If I'm cargo," I said, "then this part of the trip ends with me." My thumb hovered over delete. I thought of Coleman and the barefoot man, of Elliot's father on the CB, of Rhea driving a road that's not on any map, of Jean's invisible passenger and Hal's ghost convoy, of Marla watching something pace us in the mirror, of Mike pulling into a light that wasn't a station at all, of you, sitting wherever you are, filling in the gaps of my voice with your own imagination. I thought about the one rule I'd kept repeating even while breaking it. Don't talk back. so I didn't say anything else. I hit delete. The voicemail died mid-breath, the engine noise cut out. For a heartbeat there was absolutely nothing. No hum, no vibration, no sound at all. Then with a lurch that made me slam my hands against the floor to keep from toppling over, the apartment stopped moving. The walls snapped back into full color. The window showed my street again, ugly and mundane, and lit by the sudden stutter and flare of returning power. A TV down the hall in someone else's unit clicked on. A dog barked. Somewhere outside, a real normal car alarm chirped and reset. The silence inside the phone was total. The voicemail was gone. The little icon that had been haunting my notifications for days had vanished, leaving nothing but an empty grey line where it once sat. For the first time in what felt like months, the air in my lungs didn't taste like gasoline. I stayed on the floor for a long time. Eventually, the world around me remembered what it was supposed to be. The hum of the fridge came back. The cheap overhead light flickered once and steadied. My computer booted itself with a faint chime. Notifications started pouring back into my phone as all the apps remembered they had been alive, that they had things to tell me. I swiped them away without reading. Later, when I finally gathered enough courage to sit at the desk again, I opened my channel. The video was still there, the comments were still there, the stream archive, the weird stats, the blank chat replay, still there. But the live from the cab rogue track was gone from my files. The phantom stream entry had disappeared. The dashcam video had corrupted itself into static. The emails about extra titles with my voice on them no longer had their attachments. The files had broken into empty shells. Whatever lane I'd opened, I'd at least managed to slam a gate on my section of it. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like breaking hard enough to smell burning rubber, knowing you'd still blown through a guardrail somewhere along the line. I stopped uploading new horror after that. I didn't make an announcement. Didn't post a dramatic goodbye. I just stopped. Left this one as it is, the last mile marker on a road I refused to drive again. You can think of this as an ending if you want. A neat conclusion, a last scare, a moral about not staring too long into the dark. Or you can think about the parts I can't control, the drivers who saved my story offline, the listeners who ripped the audio and shared it, the people who retell the barefoot man, the convoy, the voice on the CB in their own words, in their own late-night whisper sessions. The thing about roads is, once enough people walk the same path, it stays, even if the first person who took it never comes back. So here's where I get off. This is the last time I tell this. The engine you hear from now on, the knocks you think you catch in the static when your radio drifts off station, the faint shape that might be in your mirror when you glance up at just the wrong moment, that's between you and whatever's still out there, pacing the shoulder. I'm done being its dispatcher. If you're smart, you'll let it pass. You'll keep your eyes on the lane ahead, your hands on the wheel, and when the static in your speakers shapes itself into something that sounds like your name, you won't answer. You'll remember that some stories don't want closure, they want cargo. And the only way to really end them for yourself is not with a clever last line or a perfectly crafted ending. It's with silence. So this is mine, no twist, no last jump scare. Just me stepping off the road, turning off the mic, and leaving you with quiet long enough to decide, when the next voice crackles through the dark and asks if anyone can hear it, whether you're going to talk back or let it keep walking forever, on a road that doesn't have your name on it.